It was Alex, the original guy that owned the Bugatti in the first place and crashed it. After he got paid out from insurance, it got taken to auction, he then bought the car back. Why he did that, I guess we'll have to find out. All I know is that he's asked us if we can try and repair it.
A $6 million Bugatti Chiron per Sport crashes in Miami.
Alex crashes the car, it won't break at that point.
Bugatti didn't do this from the factory because it would have cost a lot more to do.
Insurance companies write it off. Bugatti experts fly in from Paris, inspect the wreckage, and declare the car beyond repair. The VIN is locked. Parts are blocked. The world's most exclusive hypercar manufacturer had spoken, and the automotive world had listened. But then one man buys it anyway. Not a factory engineer, not a Bugatti certified technician. A British YouTuber with over 3.2 million subscribers and a refusal to accept what every expert was telling him. His name was Matt Armstrong. What followed became one of the most watched battles in automotive history. This is how a dead Bugatti fought its way back to life. The car nobody wanted. The story begins not with Matt Armstrong, but with a crash. The Bugatti Chiron per Sport at the center of this story originally belonged to Alex Gonzalez, a Miami-based content creator known online as FexAlexKit, who had acquired one of the most extreme road cars ever built. The Chiron per Sport is not a standard hypercar. It is a track-focused, driver-focused evolution of the already extreme Chiron.
Chiron per Sport. One of the most expensive Bugattis ever made. It's a more track-focused, lightweight version of the Chiron, and they only made 60 of them.
Lighter, sharper, more aerodynamic, more demanding in every dimension. At the time of the accident, the car was valued at approximately $6 million. It was, by any measure, one of the most capable and most expensive production vehicles ever to travel a public road. The accident was severe. The front end of the car took a direct and devastating impact, crumpling the carbon fiber structure, deploying every airbag in the cabin.
Airbags, basically a brand new Bugatti, and it will be stamped by Bugatti, certified, rebuilt by Bugatti.
And sending shockwaves of damage through systems that most independent mechanics would never have encountered before, let alone repaired. The damage was not simply cosmetic. The gearbox housing had shattered. The monocoque, the central carbon fiber structure that forms the backbone of the entire car, had taken structural damage of a kind that Bugatti considered irreparable outside of its own factory. Insurance companies received the assessment and responded accordingly. The repair quotes climbed to $1.7 million. And even at that price, nobody was certain the car could be returned to the standard Bugatti required. Bugatti sent an expert from Paris to assess the wreckage in person. The conclusion was final and unambiguous. The car was a write-off. It received a salvage title and was listed on Copart, the online salvage auction platform, where damaged and written-off vehicles find new owners at fractions of their original value. For most people who saw the listing, the response was the same one the experts had already reached. This was not a project. This was a parts car at best and a very expensive mistake at worst. The Chiron per Sport had been one of only 500 examples ever built. Now it was a damaged shell in a Florida auction. And Bugatti had made its position clear. The manufacturer was not going to help anyone put it back together. Then Bugatti did something that transformed the situation from difficult to almost impossible. The company locked the car's vehicle identification number, the unique code that connects a car to its manufacturer's records and supply chain. With the VIN locked, no authorized Bugatti dealership anywhere in the world would sell replacement parts for this specific car. It was not merely that Bugatti was unwilling to help. It was that Bugatti had actively constructed a wall between this car and the parts it needed to survive.
We've got to get Bugatti parts back somehow. So we're heading to our old favourite, Walmart, to go and get some suitcases to fit Bugatti parts in.
The message from Molsheim was unambiguous. This car was dead, and they intended it to stay that way. What none of them anticipated was that in October of 2025, a man in the United Kingdom would see the listing, book a flight to Miami, and decide that the wall was not as permanent as Bugatti believed. Matt Armstrong had built his reputation on exactly this kind of challenge. Over 3.2 million subscribers had followed him across years of rebuilding crashed exotic cars. Lamborghini Huracans, McLaren 720S models, Porsches of various descriptions, always buying salvage vehicles that the market had written off, and always finding a way to bring them back to life at a fraction of the cost that official dealers would charge. The Bugatti was different in every conceivable way. It was more complex, more expensive, more structurally compromised, and more actively protected by its manufacturer than anything Armstrong had ever attempted. He flew to Miami anyway, he bought the car anyway, and the most consequential rebuild in the history of automotive YouTube had officially begun. The wall Bugatti built, the first wall Armstrong hit, was the one Bugatti had already built before he arrived. With the VIN locked, every avenue to official parts was closed. No dealership would engage. No authorized workshop would touch the car without factory approval, even if Armstrong had the money. And the repair estimates suggested the factory repair would cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. Bugatti was not interested in facilitating a rebuild that it had already declared impossible and potentially dangerous. This was not a company being unhelpful. This was a company with a genuine publicly stated position that the Chiron PURS Sport's structural damage made independent repair a safety risk, and that certifying any version of this car that had not been rebuilt to their own standards was something they were not prepared to do. The position was not without logic. The Chiron PURS Sport is not a machine that forgives improvisation. Its carbon fiber monocoque is engineered to absorb and distribute crash forces in ways that have been calculated to extraordinary precision. The cooling system involves
Everything was good. Running to temperature, cooling in, everything, and we got it up to speed, but we did have some warning lights on the dashboard that we need to get off.
10 separate radiators, not one, not two, but 10, each positioned and calibrated as part of a thermal management system that keeps a 16-cylinder, 1,500-plus horsepower engine alive under sustained extreme use. The gearbox is a 7-speed dual-clutch unit of a specification that exists nowhere else in the production car world. Every system connects to every other system in ways that most workshops have never encountered. Bugatti's concern, stated publicly by Mate Rimac,
Bugatti, just moments away from announcing the next big development in the Rimac automobile journey, is something that I have never imagined. Today, we are announcing the creation of a new company, the best hypercar company in the world, called Bugatti Rimac.
CEO of Bugatti Rimac, was that the gearbox housing had shattered and the monocoque had taken structural damage, and that the consequences of getting the rebuild wrong were not just mechanical. They were potentially fatal. Rimac's public statement on the matter was direct. He acknowledged Armstrong's project and raised genuine safety concerns about independent repairs on a car of this complexity, not as an attack on Armstrong's ability, but as a statement about the engineering reality of what had been damaged. The structural integrity of a hypercar monocoque is not something that can be approximated. It either meets the specification or it does not. And without factory involvement, there was no way to certify that what Armstrong was rebuilding would perform the way the original had been designed to perform in a collision. The wall Bugatti had built was not just bureaucratic. It was, in a certain light, reasonable. It was also, from Armstrong's perspective, a wall he was going to go through regardless. What changed the dynamic, and what transformed the story from a simple confrontation between a YouTuber and a manufacturer into something more nuanced, was what happened next. Despite the initial refusal, despite the locked VIN, despite the public safety concerns, Mate Rimac subsequently stated that he would support Armstrong's project. And Bugatti, in a move that surprised almost everyone following the story, eventually lifted the part's blacklist and reduced their repair estimates. The immovable wall had moved. Not fully, not completely, and not without conditions, but the door that had been sealed shut had been opened a crack. Armstrong was still largely on his own, but he was no longer entirely without a path forward. What lay ahead of him would require every skill he had ever developed. and several he had never needed before. The project that Armstrong was now committed to had no roadmap. No manufacturer's guide existed for rebuilding a crashed Chiron per Sport in a private workshop in Miami. No forum thread documented the process. No previous rebuild had ever reached this stage and been shared publicly. Armstrong and his team were, in the most literal sense, figuring it out as they went. Using the same combination of mechanical intuition, creative problem-solving, and refusal to accept defeat that had defined every project Armstrong had ever taken on, applied now to the most technically demanding car in the history of his channel. The question was not whether this would be difficult. The question was whether difficult, in this case, was enough to stop him. When the parts don't exist. When the full extent of the damage became clear after the initial teardown, the task in front of Armstrong resolved itself into a list of problems that each would have been challenging on their own, and that together formed one of the most daunting mechanical undertakings any independent workshop had ever attempted on a road car. The front structure of the Chiron had taken the direct impact of the crash. Carbon fiber components that normally formed the front crash structure, the hood, the wings, and the iconic Bugatti horseshoe grille had been destroyed or severely compromised. The airbags, multiple units throughout the cabin, had all deployed, meaning every single one needed to be replaced before the car could legally carry a driver. The airbag problem illustrated perfectly the kind of creative thinking that the entire project would demand. Original Bugatti airbag units were unavailable through the supply channel Armstrong could access. The solution, when it came, was remarkable in its pragmatism, sourcing compatible airbag units from an Audi A3.
On this Audi S3, airbags on the bonnet hinges, and all I can think of is that that is going to be expensive.
Not from a rival hypercar, not from another manufacturer's premium product, from a family hatchback that shared certain components with the Bugatti's Volkswagen Group lineage deep within its engineering heritage. It was the kind of solution that engineers working within the official system would never have considered, and that Armstrong's team arrived at through sheer necessity and determination to find a path forward when every official path was closed. The cooling system presented its own extraordinary challenge. The Bugatti Chiron uses 10 separate radiators, a number that reflects the thermal demands of an 8-liter, 16-quad-turbocharged engine producing power outputs that generate heat on a scale that most road cars will never approach. Every one of those radiators had to be rebuilt or replaced. With official parts unavailable, Armstrong's team turned to a specialist named Bob from a facility called the Machine Shop, a craftsman whose contribution to this project would become one of its defining stories. Bob took on the task of hand fabricating the custom crash bar that the Chiron's front structure required, working without an original part to reference, building it entirely from his own measurements, skill, and 60 hours of sustained, meticulous effort. The crash bar Bob built was not an approximation. It was a precise recreation, accurate enough to include the mounting points and threads that allowed it to bolt directly to the Chiron's chassis legs, exactly as the original had. The fact that it was fabricated from scratch, in a private workshop, by a specialist who had never worked on a Bugatti before, without the original part as a template, and that it met the dimensional requirements of a monocoque designed by one of the most demanding engineering teams in the automotive world, was the kind of achievement that the word remarkable genuinely undersells. Armstrong recognized it publicly. This was not just mechanical skill. This was craftsmanship at a level that deserved acknowledgement, and it received it. Alongside the crash bar, Armstrong's team turned their attention to what was arguably the most technically critical repair of the entire project: the engine and gearbox mount bracket. The bracket connecting the engine to the gearbox had been damaged in the crash, and without a replacement, the powertrain could not be properly secured. No official replacement was available. So Armstrong's team did something that combined engineering precision with the kind of resourcefulness the entire project had come to represent. They three-dimensionally scanned the damaged bracket, converted the scan data into a computer-aided design model, and machined a new bracket from scratch using that model as the template. It was not a workaround. It was a genuine engineering solution to a genuinely engineering-level problem, executed with tools and methods that the automotive world's establishment had never expected to see applied to a machine of this caliber. The machine becomes whole with the mechanical groundwork laid, the crash bar fabricated, the radiators rebuilt, the airbags sourced, the bracket machined. Armstrong and his team faced the moment that every complex rebuild eventually arrives at, the moment of reassembly. The moment when every individual component, every fabricated part, every improvised solution has to come together into something that functions as a coherent whole. For the Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport, that moment was complicated by a structural reality that the crash had created. The car had been so severely damaged that it had effectively been separated into its front and rear sections. And those two sections now had to be physically rejoined. The rejoining was achieved using 14 titanium bolts, a detail that sounds almost poetic in the context of everything that had led to this point. Titanium, chosen for its strength-to-weight ratio and its compatibility with the carbon fiber structure. 14 bolts, chosen because that was the precise number required to bring the two halves of a $6 million hypercar back into alignment after everything they had been through. The transmission mount was welded back into position. The front and rear sections were drawn together. And for the first time since the crash, the Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport existed again as a complete unified structure. Not yet running, not yet road legal, but whole in a way that nobody outside Armstrong's workshop had believed it would ever be again. And then Armstrong made a mistake. In the careful, painstaking process of reassembling the bodywork and reconnecting the systems, he accidentally crushed a fuel tank pressure sensor, a small but critical component, between sections of the car's body during reassembly. The sensor was damaged. Without it functioning correctly, the fuel system could not operate safely. Pulling the engine to access and replace the sensor through conventional means would have meant undoing days of work and risking the integrity of connections that had already been made under extraordinarily difficult circumstances. It was the kind of setback that, after months of progress, could have broken the project entirely.
Now the goal is simple. Remove every damaged part until nothing broken remains.
It did not break it. Instead, Armstrong found a solution that was, in its own way, characteristic of everything this rebuild had become. Rather than pulling the engine and accessing the sensor the conventional way, he cut a custom access point. A small, carefully positioned opening that allowed him to reach the sensor without disturbing the engine or the connections around it. He replaced the sensor. He modified the access point so that the same problem could never recur in the same way. And he moved forward. The solution was inelegant by Bugatti's standards. It was not the factory method. It was not the approved approach. But it worked, and in the context of a rebuild that had survived a locked VIN, a manufacturer's refusal, a shattered gearbox housing, and 10 custom radiators, a creative access solution for a pressure sensor felt almost routine. Valvetronic, a specialist exhaust fabrication company, came in to build a custom exhaust system for the car. A bespoke unit designed to give the Chiron's 16-cylinder engine a sound profile that the rebuild team believed the car deserved. Every major system had now been addressed. Every critical component had been either repaired, fabricated from scratch, or sourced through means that no official Bugatti process would ever have sanctioned. The car that Bugatti had declared impossible to rebuild was, by the beginning of 2026, beginning to look less like wreckage and more like what it had always been, one of the most extraordinary machines ever produced for a public road. The only question remaining was whether it would start. The engine that changed everything. In March of 2026, Matt Armstrong and his team gathered around a car that had spent months being taken apart, rebuilt, questioned, improvised upon, welded, bolted, scanned, machined, and brought back from the kind of damage that the manufacturer itself had declared terminal. The engine had been reconnected to its transmission. The cooling system, all 10 radiators, had been filled and checked. The fuel system was pressurized. The electrical systems that governed everything from the engine management to the stability control had been brought back online. Everything that could be checked had been checked. Everything that could be prepared had been prepared. And now there was nothing left to do but turn the key and find out whether the sum of everything Armstrong's team had done was enough. The engine started. The 16 cylinders of the Bugatti Chiron Pour Sport's quad-turbocharged 8-liter power plant fired into life.
Part of the thing about these sort of cars, these hypercars, like you say, nobody needs 16 cylinders.
Inside a private workshop in Miami, Florida, producing the sound that Bugatti had said would never come from this car again in a setting that Bugatti had never anticipated, achieved by methods that Bugatti had never approved. The coolant system was intact. The temperature readings were normal. The engine ran. And in the moment that it did, the entire 7-month journey that had brought Armstrong to this point, the flight from the United Kingdom, the salvage auction, the locked VIN, the expert's write-off verdict, the 60 hours Bob spent fabricating a crash bar, the Audi A3 airbags, the 14 titanium bolts, the crushed sensor, the custom exhaust. All of it resolved into a single undeniable fact. The impossible rebuild had produced an engine that ran. Shortly after the first start, the car moved under its own power for the first time since the crash. A short, careful test drive that was not a celebration so much as a verification. A confirmation that the systems Armstrong had rebuilt were not just cosmetically complete, but mechanically functional. The car was not yet road legal. Significant work remained before it could be registered, insured, and driven on a public road in any jurisdiction. But it was moving, it was running, and it was doing so because one person had refused to accept what everyone, the manufacturer, the insurance company, the experts, the industry, had told him was the only possible outcome. And then came a development that added an entirely new dimension to the story. Christian von Koenigsegg, the founder and CEO of Koenigsegg, one of the few hypercar manufacturers whose cars are considered more extreme than
Christian von Koenigsegg. For half of my life, I've been on the quest to be a leader in the hypercar industry, utilizing Swedish design combined with visionary technical solutions.
The Bugatti that Armstrong had just rebuilt publicly reached out to Armstrong in the wake of the project. The nature and substance of that outreach added a layer to the Armstrong saga that nobody had anticipated when it began. The story that had started as a confrontation between a British YouTuber and the world's most exclusive automotive brand had now drawn in the founder of the brand that many considered Bugatti's only true rival at the absolute pinnacle of road car performance. The hypercar world was paying attention in a way it had not paid attention to a YouTube rebuild project before. What happens next is still being written. The Bugatti Chiron Pour Sport that everyone said was finished sits in a workshop that has become one of the most watched garages in the automotive world. Closer to the road every week. Still carrying the evidence of everything it has survived, still requiring the work and the ingenuity that has defined every step of the journey so far. Matt Armstrong has not finished. Bugatti has not commented on what the car's road-legal future looks like, and the viewers who have followed every step of this story, millions of them, across platforms and continents, are still watching, still waiting, and still wondering whether the rebuild that nobody thought was possible will end with a $6 million Bugatti Chiron Pour Sport driving on a public road under its own power, with the man who refused to give up behind the wheel. A locked VIN, a Paris write-off verdict, airbags from an Audi A3, 14 titanium bolts holding two halves of a $6 million Bugatti together, 10 radiators rebuilt from scratch, a crushed sensor fixed with a custom access cut, and an engine that fired. Inside a private Miami workshop, against every prediction that the automotive world had ever made. The rebuild that Bugatti said was impossible is not finished yet. The car is still not road legal. And the CEO of Koenigsegg has now entered the picture in a way nobody expected. Drop a comment right now. Do you think Armstrong gets this Bugatti fully road legal? Hit that like button. Subscribe, because next time we go inside exactly what Koenigsegg said.